So, thank you, as always, to everyone who's tuning in. It's Monday. Monday interviews are a thing I'm trying to do here on this old stream. So, today, we'll just fucking get started. Today, we got Brandon Sheffield, very good
Hello.
friend of mine. Go ahead and say hi to the stream, Brandon.
Hi, it's me. I'm here.
So, I will. I feel like I want to let you introduce yourself, but first I will introduce the introduction, if that makes sense. Um, it was especially important to me that I get you on this thing pretty early because you were super important and helpful, kind of in helping me plug into games. From like a really early age, actually, just because your work with Insert Credit. And for people who don't know, Brandon Sheffield, I think, first left his mark in games, editing and writing for a site called Insert Credit, which was super awesome, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it. But that was super formative to me. I had been writing, just kind of like writing shitty freelance reviews about Mac games for about 3 or 4 years as like a high schooler back then, and I didn't really like. I was kind of like losing my interest. I was like, I was tired of the like, the big bold headers and like graphics, gameplay, sound, all that stuff. Like, I was super bored. And come to think of it, there might be people in chat who don't even remember that era of games, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Or games writing rather. But I found Insert Credit. I think it was probably through a link somewhere to one of Tim's pieces, and it was just this completely different way of talking and thinking about fighting game or video games, about all kinds of video games and all kinds of other stuff. And to me, at least, it was super important in kind of keeping me interested and like I think pushing me to like get to explore more that you can do about writing in games. And obviously, a whole lot has happened since then. You were like you brought me on to edit Game Developer Magazine after you pieced out and like a whole bunch of other stuff. So I just like to me this interview is actually to me it's kind of a chance to like kind of unpack the work that went into you being you and kind of tease out like all the different shit that you do and how you got involved because like and this is kind of like a bigger thing I guess but something that I like to talk a lot about the process of about skill development, and part of that, like once you start talking about getting good at things, then you also start talking about like what opportunities does that unlock, right? Like what can you do now that you couldn't before? And there was like there if I think about like career stuff, if I think about breaking into the game dev industry and that kind of stuff, there's like a lot that I learned from you that like I don't think you get in you probably wouldn't get in a game dev education, right? Like a formal education, or it's not immediately obvious that like there's more to being a game developer than just learning how to program or learning how to write or whatever. And so, like, the more I kind of followed your work, and the more that I saw you kind of level up as a developer, and just continue to navigate the industry, the more I thought like there's a lot that I can continue to be learning from you, and so like it's been super inspirational and super helpful to know you and have you in my life. So I wanted to use this interview as a chance to kind of give you that as props, and then to figure out like how the hell you ended up being you, because you're a pretty weird dude, man.
Well, that's
Um,
all very nice of you to say.
so with that, I'd say like tell the stream a little bit about yourself. Who the hell are you?
I'm a guy who liked video games maybe a little bit too much, and so started that Insert Credit website, which we turned into. It started off as a reason to just go to E3 for free.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
back when that was is that still easy to do? Did they crack down on that?
I think they cracked down on that, but nowadays you can be like, "Yeah, I'm a streamer," and
Right.
they'll be like,
I'm a
"Okay."
YouTuber. Here's my channel.
Yeah,
Let me
there's
in.
there's still ways to scam.
Hmm.
Um, but then we very quickly realized that we wanted to do something a little different and talk about games in a different way. And so we kind of did that for a while. It was fun, and it's weird because that website is the best thing probably that I have ever made in my life. Because it got me a job, it got friends jobs, it got people on the forums jobs. Like that website was a this weird hub from which a whole bunch of game culture sprang
Yeah,
lately.
it's like it's I think of it now and it's almost like insert credit our alumni are like a secret society, right?
Yep.
Like we could all get tattoos, and I feel like there's a bunch of us out there that are like doing like oh man, you never guess that this person so and so who's doing this thing used to read the forums a lot or whatever, right? Or like
Right.
wrote some shitty thing about this thing when they were 17 and posted in the insert credit whatever. And then the other half is just like super kind of like I don't know, just I'd say like random people, right? And you know, like people who didn't go on to like work in the industry, people who went on to do other shit or maybe just lived like kind of a normal life, right? But they still had these interesting perspectives on video games, right? And that was kind
Yeah.
of eye-opening to me to think like you don't like people engage and embed in this medium in super different ways. And like it could be like this dude who's a checkout, cashier or whatever at Target who also just happens to have like really strong thoughts about and like well informed thoughts about like Genesis RPGs or some shit.
Yeah. Yeah, you find a lot of that nowadays. Well, I find a lot of that nowadays. Basically, I used to have this kind of love-hate relationship with insert credit and the people on the forums and feeling like there were too many memes and weird things coming from it, which frankly should have been flattering, but really annoyed me at the time. It was against what I wanted to do, I felt. But nowadays, it's like if I meet someone who says they read insert credit in 2003, then I'm like, all right, well we've got plenty to talk about. We can
Right.
be friends.
and
Um,
so insert credit like the kind of the first incarnation had phased out by like kind of the what like 2000 what 5 or something.
yeah, 2005 or
Yeah.
6, and then um,
So you were at
we.
Game Developer Magazine for a while. I want to finish the Brandon introduction
Oh yeah,
first, right? So
yeah. So I went to Game Developer Magazine and Gama Sutra. Um, Game developer. Interestingly, when I graduated from college, I needed to get a job, and so I was like, well, I'm already writing about video games. I guess this is what I should do. I applied to a bunch of places, and they all rejected me because they had all read my work before, and and they were worried that I was gonna try to make them do something other than box quotes and follow a review format and whatnot. Um, so none of those people hired me, even though they were all very interested. And then I wound up getting the job with Game Developer Magazine because they'd never heard of me before. And so they read the stuff that the reports I had written on GDC
Mhm.
without knowing me, and they were like, "All right, that's cool."
Nice.
So that was amusing. I could only get hired by people that hadn't heard of me before. Um, and then Gama Sutra as well. I was doing that simultaneously. And then I got kind of bored because I felt that having done sort of some form of game journalism-y thing for a bunch of years, I was stagnating and not doing anything really new or challenging myself. So I decided I wanted to write stuff in games. And the first real thing I got there was when I met these guys at Game Connection, and I really liked their poster art. And it turned out they were from Thailand, and I was like, "Hey guys, I have a film degree. You should let me write your games." and and then they said okay, pretty much. Not exactly like that, but I wound up rewriting this one game. The first game that has a lot of my writing in it is called Barnyard Blast: Swine of the Night,
Damn.
which is yeah, it's pretty embarrassing to go back at it now, back and look at it now because speaking of memes, that's pretty much what they wanted
Mhm.
was a bunch of winner is you style jokes,
Gotcha.
uh, which I
What
did make. I
did
made some
it?
other good
What
ones,
did it
but
end up coming out for on?
DS.
Okay. Wow. So I can go
Yeah,
pick up a copy of Barnyard Blast somewhere.
absolutely you
All
could.
right.
Uh,
I might do
and
this.
and go for it. It's not great.
Mhm.
It's not a very good game,
No.
but it is kind of interesting a little bit, sort of. The best thing for me was just a few months ago, I was at the flea market here in Oakland, and I saw one of those, 150 in one DS pirate
Yeah.
cart packages, and there were two main games featured on the front. It had tons of games all around this box, but there were two main games right on the front, and one of them was Barnyard Blast, and I was like,
Yes.
all right, I made it finally.
It's the
I made it to piracy.
I don't think NPD group numbers ever appropriately accounted for like the long tail flea market effect, but that's definitely something that should go into
Yeah,
into your yearly, right?
it's interesting to think about that one because it they got a good deal with a distributor, so a whole bunch were printed, and
Mhm.
so they wound up being really cheap in a bunch of Targets and stuff.
Huh.
And so a surprising number of people have played it, and there are like a few YouTube videos about it, which was a real surprise to me. There's a video with like 10,000 views of someone playing through Barnyard Blast. I'm like, what the heck? So then after that, I started doing more writing in games for other games. I wound up doing, a lot of the terminal text in the DS game Moon, which was the sequel to Dementium, not the sequel, the spiritual successor to Dementium, which
Dementium.
was, yeah, DS horror game.
Ah,
I had one line in Dementium too.
nice. There,
Um,
there. It seemed like I remember like the kind of early DS era where there's still a lot of neat like weird stuff coming. I guess there's still weird stuff coming out for it, but I mean like Lost in Blue and a lot of the stuff around then that seemed super narrative focused in the beginning, or at least that
yeah,
there's a receptivity to like the more visually novelty stuff.
yeah, there was a lot more weird stuff back then, but there's some visual novelty stuff on the Vita now. It's just all about touching 12-year-olds. Uh,
Okay.
so it doesn't really scratch that same itch that you might be hoping for with expanding your mind. Um, then I got a job with being narrative director for a large company, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. But that
Right.
didn't work out, not because of me or because of the team or because of the game, but because of money, and that's too bad. Um, so then I got depressed about that and decided it was time to quit and start my own little video game company, and that's what has happened. Now I have Necrosoft Games, and we make some tiny little video games that some people like a lot and most people haven't seen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is actually that's kind of hallmark Brandon Sheffield, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Very specific taste for very specific people, but invariably, and it's you mentioned this with insert credit as well. Like, if people like the same things, not even the same things. I think it's if people have a similarly narrow taste to yours, then you get along with them.
Yeah.
Like they could index super hard on something that you don't like, but at the very least that would catch your interest. And that was
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
what I felt like when I met you. I think if I remember correctly, what happened was so I met Tim Rogers in Japan and hung out with him a few times. And then when he came back to Oakland, he did one of those things where he like holds court at a restaurant and has a bunch of people who don't know each other wait their turn to talk to him. Uh,
Yeah.
which is something that I didn't realize was like a regular thing that he did until I went to a few of those. But
Yeah.
shortly thereafter, I think you were interested in reviving insert credit, and I was interested in egging you on, and so I kind of like pushed myself into there. But it was like my initial connection with you was on fighting games. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it, right? Because pretty much most of the people who I knew in video games, since I wasn't like professionally really working in that space at that time, if I knew anyone in video games, it was through fighting games, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't think it was is that strange until I realized, like, oh, you're actually kind of embedded in the industry proper, right? Like GD Mag was the major publication for the industry. Gama Sutra is still similar. GDC, like kind of the core event that the industry rotates around, right? So you're like a regular games dude, who
Yeah.
is also into fighting games. And then the more I got to know you, the more I realized that your interest in fighting games is different, right? Like you
Yeah.
didn't engage quite the same pattern that compared to like the people who you see show up on streams, who go to the tournaments, who go to events, who go to Evo, that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
So given that most of the people I know who are watching this stream want to talk fighting games, like let's do that first, right?
Yeah.
Let's
I wanted to say one weird thing
yeah.
about that one weird trick, man. Just I went back and reread my reviews of I mostly reviewed KOF on
Hmm.
Insert Credit. I wrote about fighting games sometimes, and it's very evident to me. I don't play. I'm not a technical person really when it
Hmm.
comes to fighting games. But I like how they feel, or how they move, or how they flow and stuff like that. And it's so obvious that I was thinking about them all that way. I mean, all the time
Hmm.
when I was writing about these things. Like, let's see, what did I have here? Um, yeah, talking about 2001 and how much I liked it. Oh yeah, there was KOF EX2,
Hmm.
and I was writing here, but all the while I wanted it to be a console game. I wanted to be playing it on, say, a Dreamcast,
Aw.
and it's like who cares what platform it's on,
Right.
except if a Dreamcast game has a certain kind of aesthetic to you and a certain kind of feeling to you, and you want it to be more in that direction. And I feel like that was the way that I sort of interacted with these things. Like I cared so much about 2001 for some reason because I really liked the art KOF 2001.
Hmm.
Um, and and I was writing about characters and stuff, and I say, so in 2002, KOF 2002, we have a Mei in stagnation. She's no longer the dynamic new face. She's huddled in with the girls in the women's team. She's not as present as she once was, and certainly not as central to the universe. So like what that wasn't like who cares
Yeah.
about that? I do,
It's
but
it's it's
why?
that's interesting to me though because like if there's one thing that like if I had to define uh if I had to come up with like a very finite description of you, I think sensitive would be an adjective that would come to mind almost immediately, right? But like it's super powerful in video games because like this is all stuff that matters, right? And especially when you're talking about game feel, right? Like that's something which I feel like like people who play fighting games get super connected to games, and they're so like we interact with everything about a character at such a visceral level, right? And the game at such a visceral level
Yeah.
that feel is actually is a huge part of it. But it's something that people didn't know how to talk about or describe for a long time, right? And when I think about a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff that Insert Credit was doing early on, is like kind of using a more experiential and emotional outlook on a game to talk about
Yeah.
why it's good and why it's not good, right? And like I saw a lot of that later in a lot of Tim's work where he would go super in deep as to like why this jump is better than this other jump or whatever, right? The sticky friction essay for Kotaku and a million other things. But like to me, it all comes back to that kind of that core sensitivity, right? Is that like you're super affected by a game that you really like, and you're so particular that I feel like you end up with a pretty good vocabulary for describing what you like and don't like,
Mm.
just so you can explain to someone like, no, this thing that you're doing here is wrong, and I know you don't care about it, but you should because it matters for these reasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so that to me is fascinating. Like how you've always kind of been like an SNK or a KOF guy, from what I recall. I mean, you've always
Hmm.
kind of been on like the like the obscure side for video games in general, right? Like you didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up. Yeah, it was TG16 and a Genesis.
Yeah. Yeah, actually I had the TurboGrafx and the Duo before I even got a Genesis. But I played Genesis a bit more than the other stuff because my stepbrother had a Genesis, and
Hmm.
so I was able to play that a bit earlier. I bought a Genesis in high school, but which I was, let's see, when I was in high school, Genesis had been out. I don't know. I think when I started getting into Genesis, the Genesis 3 had just come out, which was like Majesco's last ditch cash grab
Huh.
on maybe some people still want to play this. That was in I don't know, 96 or 97. So
That's
I was
super late.
pretty yeah, I was pretty late to a lot of that stuff. It was mostly just TurboGrafx. I think I got like Genesis, then Super Nintendo, then Saturn, then PlayStation, all around, the late mid to much later 90s.
Hmm.
And I didn't even have a Super Nintendo until college. I mean, a regular NES
Gotcha.
till college. So, yeah, I followed a slightly different path, which I'm grateful for because it definitely informed the way that I played and cared about video games because I I could only afford what I could afford,
Right.
and I jumped pretty much straight into the CD sound era,
Okay.
with the Turbo Duo and its awesome music, but I mean, I did, as I said, play Genesis stuff with my stepbrother, Gunstar Heroes, Sonic 2. So I had those starting in my like age 12, 13, 14. So that was still formative.
So how'd you get pulled into fighting games?
The first time I played a fighting game was Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo at a friend's house.
Okay.
He had everything, I guess, that I could conceive of at the time. And I remember, first of all, being confused by how many buttons there were on the Super Nintendo controller. And then, he would try sort of to describe to me how I was supposed to do these moves and stuff, and I couldn't figure it out. And I couldn't figure out why people liked something like this so much because it was so complicated and difficult to pull off.
Hmm.
Um, but eventually, I don't know, I played it a couple times at his house, and then I saw a Street Fighter 2 Rainbow Edition. I didn't know that's what it was. It just said Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
But I saw a Rainbow Edition at its 7-Eleven, and I was like, "Oh man, this one's super weird. I like this." Because you know, Blanca's turning into Bison as he dashes across the screen. This is a weird game. I kind of like what's happening here. Um, but I think, I got more and more into it as I bought a Neo Geo CD,
Hmm.
and got all these King of Fighters games and started really playing those. And I think what got me to really stick with it was partially the load times. Like, you had to commit yourself so much to really playing this game because a stage would load for 3 minutes
Oh
on the
my
Neo Geo
god.
CD. Yeah, it was ridiculous. There was this little juggling monkey that would be the loading screen for you, and I came to hate that monkey. The monkey was a friggin' jerk. He's getting in the way of me and my fun. But so I got into KOF. I really liked the big sound in KOF. The all the sound effects are overblown. They
Hmm.
sound like they're all peaking. They were recorded poorly and are just blown out. And I loved that. It made the game feel large and cool. The first time I ever saw a Neo Geo game was at this store called Beeman Company in Fremont, California, where they had just a bunch of cool nerd things, which I just thought were cool things. I didn't know about the nerd part yet. But they had, Sailor Moon wall scrolls and Sonmei bootleg anime
Sure.
CDs, soundtracks, and then one day I walked in there and there was this giant hunking console with giant cartridge in it, and I'm like, what the hell is that? And they were playing Samurai Showdown, and they're like, it's Neo Geo, duh.
I mean,
And
I remember like I read like a Game Pro. I subscribed for several years. I remember the ads for the Neo Geo console where there's like a lame like plain hot dog, and then there was one with like mustard and ketchup and relish, and I forget. I think it was like some stupid joke about how their competition are weenies.
yeah,
But like for me, the Neo Geo was always like, oh man, maybe if I ran a bake sale out of my garage every weekend for 2 months, then I can buy a Neo Geo, and if I do another month, then I can buy a game.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I went with the CD because it was cheaper.
Nice.
But I didn't have the money.
Hmm.
I borrowed $300 from the richest friend that I knew,
Nice.
which
Wait,
I still
how
can't.
old are you at this point?
I was like 15 or 16 years old.
Oh
I
shit.
can't believe that I did that because I had no I didn't know when I was going to be able to pay him back. Just like unashamedly was like, "Hey, can I have $300?" And then I bought a Neo Geo CD with like 10 games. I was like, "This is such a good deal. I have to do this. I have to." Um, I did pay him back, by the way.
Nice.
In not too much time. I had a job and all. I just didn't have $300 right then. Um, and around the same time, I also got the Neo Geo Pocket Color,
Okay.
which I actually happen to have one sitting right next to me.
So hi Neo Geo Pocket Color. Look
Yeah,
at that cutie.
yeah. This is the NNGPC, the new Neo Geo Pocket Color.
Oh.
It's the last run
Hmm.
that they made. It's slightly smaller. It's a really cool system. I really like it. But it had tons of fighting games, and there was such a close feeling to the game when you played on that system because it's got this clicky stick. You
That's
hear
right.
that?
I do remember
Yeah.
that.
It's got a clicky stick. It had pressure sensitive buttons, um, and it felt really good playing fighting games on this. And suddenly I felt like, those moves that I was so confused by and had so much trouble with on the Super Nintendo were so simple and straightforward on the Neo Geo Pocket. And it
Hmm.
wasn't because, like, part of it was because I had played some more things, but I think the biggest part was that the control was just better and it
Right.
fit how my brain wanted to work. And and I got the clicky stick controller for the Neo Geo CD, and that made that easier. And then when I eventually moved to the Saturn, I was like, well, this is close enough. And so Saturn games felt really good too. And so I think probably the Neo Geo Pocket Color was my biggest fighting game connection until the Saturn, and then by then I liked fighting games already, but
Hmm.
I wasn't very good at them.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell me about that a little bit. Right. So far you've been talking about the time and the method that you've been playing fighting games, but. I mean, certainly, I remember playing Street Fighter 2 when it first came out, and I think I was like 5 or 6 at the time,
mhm.
and I couldn't like it. It wasn't until the game came out for Super Nintendo years later that I was actually like capable. Like my hands were actually capable of doing any of those things, right?
Mhm.
But I remember at the time like everyone was kind of playing them. Like it was just like the point at a friend's sleepover or a visit to a friend's house or whatever where you bust out the game consoles, you're gonna play some Street Fighter until one person wins too much and then it sucks.
Yeah.
um, was that
So
how you were doing it too, or were you mostly just like playing at home alone by yourself, or like?
I was mostly playing Home Alone by myself.
Hmm.
I there was some like the time I can remember in those early days for me playing a fighting game with another person uh, was Mortal Kombat 2 on the Game Gear, where a friend and I would switch off playing.
Okay, yeah.
Um, and so we weren't really playing together, but he would be like, "You're not very good at that," or I would be like, "You could totally use, don't you know how to do ride and fly across the screen thingy?"
Right.
Um, and so yeah, I didn't really play fighting games with other people until Oscar 120%.
Okay.
Uh, that was the real time when I would try to play KOF with some people, but it didn't really. There was absolutely no culture of playing video games in my high school,
Hmm.
um, and I just didn't know a whole lot of people who played games, and I knew nobody who played fighting games except I guess maybe it's possible that guy whose house I went over to that had Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo. Maybe he played, but I wasn't really in touch with him anymore.
Gotcha. So
So
I knew Oscar was gonna come up eventually,
yeah.
and this is more for the stream's sake, but a couple times a year, I think it usually boils down to whenever you're in Southern California.
Yeah.
Um, Brandon and some of our other mutual friends host a get together where we play a specific set of old games, and it usually ends up being this weird, like final semi leaked build of Oscar 120% Burning Fest,
Yeah.
and what was the other one? Garodin,
Yeah. Garuda and Break Blow.
Break Blow,
Yeah.
Fist or Twist.
Yeah.
Right. So I have for a long time wanted to introduce Brandon to like other to poverty fighting game players, because I think that your tastes would overlap significantly.
Yeah.
But it's a super it's a they're a bunch of fun, and it's even, I'd say they're games that it's even more fun to play with people who don't really know fighting games all that well. But
Yes.
I have to know, like, how the hell you discovered that game of all games and how it stuck with you.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that today, and Oscar came from our friend Vincent Diamante, who was the co-founder of Insert Credit. He was like the other import game dude in my dorm in college, freshman year. And, he was the other dude with the Dreamcast before they came out in America, so we were trading games. And Vince was always better at fighting games, or at any video game than me. And we both had our Saturns with us as well, and we were playing some games there. We actually used to play Street Fighter Alpha 3 dramatic mode. That was
Nice.
super, super fun in survival. Survival dramatic mode is excellent fun. But he's like, have you ever played this game, Oscar 120%? And I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, God, okay. And so he shows it to me, and he's Vince, especially at the time, was not one for pulling punches or anything. So he was just destroying me and wiping the floor with me while we were playing this game. And I was like, I don't really get it. But he did part of the way he described it appealed to me, because it seemed like, well, there were only 3 buttons. Really, realistically 2. The third button is actually A and B together.
Yeah.
And the D-pad, and and everything made sense to me. Like, I could kind of envision the whole picture of what the game was.
Right.
And so I borrowed it from him, and I played it for like a week, and against the AI, which was my usual way of playing fighting games, by myself, and and I just chose a character that I thought was cool. This character called Ryuko, who's a volleyball player, and I started playing around, and I was mostly, spamming special moves. That's what I was doing. But through spamming special moves, I wound up accidentally linking some things together. And so then when I went back to Vince, I was like, hey, let's play again. And I was playing Ryuko, who was, as far as he was concerned, a character that wasn't very good, as far as he was concerned at the time.
Right.
Because he'd only played it, a few times with his friends in Maryland. And so I was, I was playing with Ryuko, and I did this thing. I got him into, I did this grab, and then it slams him on the ground, and then I did a forward dash headbutt that hit him back up into the air. I jumped and slammed him down, and then did a dive. And it took 30% of his health off. And he was like, I did not know you could do that. and so suddenly, because of that, he's like, there's a lot more to this game, isn't there? And I was like, I don't know. But I knew how to do that. I had figured out how to do that combination. And so because of that, he and I started playing with each other a lot. And he was better than me pretty consistently until we were pretty much dead even. And so I think that game really kind of made me feel like I could play fighting games.
Yeah.
As long as they had a system that let me do it without a lot of struggle. And so I guess I'd like to describe Oscar for people that may not be
Please.
familiar. It's an all-girls fighting game that was pretty speedy for the time. It's not as fast as something like Melty Blood, or all the anime fighters of today, but it was pretty fast, and but the main appeal to me, aside from fast, because I always liked to play the fast character in whatever fighting game. Um, the main appeal was the consistency and simplicity of inputs. So, uh, tapping twice in any direction does something. So, double tap forward or back is a dash. You can jump twice, so that's two taps. If you like down, down, and a button is usually a launcher attack. Also, if you're getting wall slammed or floor slammed, if you tap twice in the opposite direction of the way that you're falling, then you do a quick recover and retain some of your health. But also, just most characters have a down, down button, quarter circle forward button, quarter circle backward button, or a dash button.
Right.
And those are the main. That's the main tool set for every character. It doesn't change that much. So if you learn the inputs on one character, you know the inputs on all the other characters more or less. And it's just about how those moves come out, what the timing is. Oh, and the other big factor is the clashing,
Hmm.
where um, I was never good at defense as a generally a masher in fighting games. Um, and so I tried to play Third Strike when I was in high school at an arcade, and I heard about the Just Defend or whatever, or the Perfect Block, and and I was like, man, that sounds impossible. I don't
Hmm.
think I can ever do that right, and I probably can't ever do that right because I don't have the staying power for it.
Right.
But in Asuka, a hit cancels a hit, so if you know how much this attack is how many times this attack is going to hit, you can plan out your defense as offense. And I really liked that because it encouraged the kind of player like me who just always wants to press and who isn't excited by turtling or drawing someone out. Um, but I did find that as I played more, I was able to start to read situations and I was able to find moments where it was like, oh, he whiffed that. Now I have these options
Hmm.
available to me. And that was kind of exciting. It's the first and probably only game where that has happened for me, where I can really be like, okay, I've got this narrow window here, and I can do something.
Right.
In the middle of their super. I can smack them. I can headbutt them
Hmm.
or something. And I also think I was perhaps lucky to have chosen one of the more difficult characters in the game to start with, because then when I started, trying out the essentially Shoto characters that they have, um, I was like, well, these are easy. These
Right.
are straightforward.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's Asuka, and that's part of why I like it. But there's a lot of stuff to it. I actually like compared to every other fighting game that I've played, Asuka is the only one where I've almost never played it single player.
Hmm.
Like aside from that first time, I hadn't played it single player like through the story mode until today, probably since
How is it?
2001. Single player is fine. Actually, it really shows uh how much the game favors certain characters
Interesting.
because the AI is pretty consistent, but it in what it does, but it's much harder with a grapple character than with a projectile character,
Hmm.
just because the AI is not, it punishes certain things and not other things. But yeah, I made a bunch of notes just about things that I like the projectiles in this game are often in arcs
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
do multiple hits. So there'll be like a parabola down or an arc over or a jump up and I hit a projectile down that bounces. Um, and I like that kind of stuff because it's still predictable, but it is different.
Right.
It's different without being too weird.
You get, if I'm remembering correctly, you get a moderate amount of air mobility too, right? Like not only do you get a double jump, but you can kind of control your descent a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. So as like when you're dealing with those projectiles too, it's not just, oh, I need to jump now or I need to block now. Like you have remarkably fine control in midair.
yeah. You can adjust, and many characters have attacks they do in midair that change what their position
Mm-hmm.
is. So or let them hang so that you can, like, there are a bunch of supers that cover the ground in stuff for a long time, but you can do things to keep yourself up in the air so that
Right.
that doesn't hurt you. And that's pretty cool. I like that throw that I talked about with Ryuko was really kind of at the core of me understanding this
Mm-hmm.
game. Um, and I would say that if you're playing this game against me, you don't want to get caught in one of my throws because I'm definitely going to combo it.
Yeah.
But I like having that time to work a combo out because like she grabs you and then she jumps and then slams you down.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time I have the space to think what I can do. Like how
Right.
far am I from the wall? Where do I want them to be? How much meter do they have? How much am I going to increase it by doing this? Um, and I guess that happens in everything, but in this game it just all felt mapped out to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm still not a technical player, and um, I'm certainly not the best at this game. Um, I I play it by feeling more than anything else. It's like when we introduced this game to you, I think it was last year or something.
Yeah. It was
Um,
a couple of years ago at this point, but
okay.
yeah, I remember.
I was, at first you were getting beat up,
Mm-hmm.
but then as you learned the system and figured things out, then you were suddenly the best in the room because you were a technical player and you can figure out what a system is asking of you and how
Sure.
to
Yeah.
respond to it. Um, but it's it's nice that like this is the one game where I feel like I can still hold my own
Oh
against a
yeah,
technical
absolutely.
player. So
Yeah.
it's it's nice. The system revealed itself to me. It
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't read anything about it. It evolved from playing, which
Yeah.
was really nice. Um, so yeah,
So that is really interesting to me. One of the reasons that I wanted to ask you about your kind of fighting game history, and also to like more broadly the goal of the podcast. Like part of it is kind of a personal thing where I need to I'm trying to figure out, like, for work reasons and for personal reasons, how people churn out of fighting games, right?
yeah,
Because I have at this point devoted about half my life to
yeah,
fighting games in some form, and I'm weird, and I'm definitely the norm, and not the norm. But there are a moderate amount of people out there like me, and we're the ones who show up at Evo and compete and stream and whatever, right? And so I'm always interested as far as I can tell, it is like the confluence of factors necessary to keep someone in fighting games past the first hour is almost like it's like lightning in a bottle or something,
yeah,
right? And I'm trying to catch it. And so some of the elements that I see come out of that story is like, one, you had kind of a local rival, right?
yeah,
But it wasn't
yeah,
someone that you hated, that you
right,
probably hated to lose to Vince, like he's a friend of yours, right?
yeah,
Two, you had this experience of competence early on, right? So it wasn't like you were getting shit on. Or even it wasn't like you watched a bunch of YouTube videos, because YouTube probably wasn't a thing back then.
it was not. It did not exist.
Which is weird to think about. But yeah, it wasn't like you went out and saw how it's done, right?
Yeah,
You had no idea what the apex was. You had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. But you found a little thing, a little just moment of competence, right? That initial win over Vince that kind of wakes him up a little bit. And he's like, oh, okay, this is interesting now, right? Like
yeah,
that made you feel good, right? And so you know that he's trying to top you, and so you're going to try and figure something out, right?
yeah.
Um,
And I think there are a couple other little things in there. well, actually, just more nuance
Mm-hmm.
to one of the main points, which is early competence. Um, because I have, not just me, we have shown this game to a bunch of people that are, friends and people who we like to hang out with, mostly down in LA. And, people like Matthew Kumar
Yeah.
and my friend Aaron Novak. These guys are not fighting game players,
Nope.
but they play Oscar because I was like, please play this game with us because we're gonna play it, and you're here. So unless you want to be bored, come play this game. And
We sit down
I,
and we play this for a good like 2 hours each time.
yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the games I've played the most in my life.
Yeah.
And they, they weren't amazing at first, but they found a character that they liked, and they started to get good. I remember this time when Aaron Novak, he had this run with the baseball girl,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just unstoppable, and he was feeling great, and we were all like, "Dang, what happened?" It kicked in, and
Yeah.
he knew what he was doing. He only had that run once, but we all remember it.
Right.
And so, it's this game, and I'm surprised more games don't do it. This game just lets you in right away, but
Right.
not as, it's not as simple as it could be, of course, because it still uses essentially Street Fighter inputs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, if you're a person of around my age, you've probably tried Street Fighter a couple of times.
Right.
And that's all that you really need, plus, well, I guess that other factor of someone to get you in there, and a local rival is very helpful. That was like for me with CVS2. One of the reasons there were two big reasons that I got into that game. One was my ex-girlfriend worked at an arcade,
Mm-hmm.
and
Which one?
I could play for free.
Which arcade, not which ex-girlfriend?
Yeah, the arcade was the one in the Metreon, which I forget the name of.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I remember stopping by there back when it wasn't even that long. It was like 5 years ago. It was like towards the tail end of that arcade, and they had Marvel 2 there for like $1 a play, and I'd stop by during my lunch break sometimes.
Yeah, so CVS2 was like I would play against her, but also just whoever was there,
Mm-hmm.
and the cool thing about CVS2 for me was I could use the characters that I was good at
Right.
from
Other games, yeah.
Street Fighter and King of Fighters,
Mm-hmm.
because like
Who was your team?
I wasn't my my team was very scrubby. It was every time 100% for sure Ken and Joe,
Okay.
and then I would switch in or out Andy, Terry, or
Andy wasn't in
Kyo.
that game. I wonder who. Terry and Kyo for sure.
Oh yeah, no, not Andy. Sorry, Terry or Kyo.
Okay. Yep, that is the pretty classic scrub character set.
Yeah. So that was who I would play. I was very flowchart.
Mm-hmm.
And
But you won some.
I won plenty. And I really liked the role in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But I quickly got chastised by people for rolling and throwing. They're like,
Yeah.
it's the cheapest thing. Don't
Yeah.
do that. And so I never did that. And then I started to get mad at people who did it. And then I would like really try really hard to beat them.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time there was this dude who looked like Justin Long. I don't know if it was Justin Long, who sat down, and I wanted to play CVS2, and they were like he had like a posse with him, and as soon as he saw me start playing, he basically just looked away and started talking to his friends while he destroyed me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm mad, but there's nothing I can do about
Right.
this because this guy is just so much better than me at this. Another fun thing with CVS2 was when I was in Singapore, I was hanging out with some fighting game dudes just by happenstance because
Mm-hmm.
my one of my good college friends, he's from Singapore and he moved back there, and so he didn't have a lot of time to hang out with me. So he's like, "Here's my friend, the only guy I know who likes video games, who also has no job." Um, so I hung out with this dude Ramus, who is a very high level um, Soul Calibur player
Cool.
in Singapore, and is friends with Shen. That's
Nice.
how I got to go to Shen's Tough Cookie arcade.
Aw.
Uh, and I saw him play. I played against Ramus in Tough Cookie, some Street Fighter 4. I don't remember which version it was at that point.
Right.
Arcade edition, maybe. I don't remember. Um, but he totally completely destroyed me, and I was like, all right, well, that's cool. Let's see what Xian can do. I was just curious because Ramus was like, this guy's actually really good. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, well, you just made me feel like I wasn't even playing. So let's see how much better that guy is. And then I saw Xian play Gen against Ramus's Sagat, I think, and I was like, holy crap! Look what you can do with Gen.
Yeah, he. I think if I remember correctly, Gen was in the game since the console release of Street Fighter 4 Vanilla, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
no one gave a shit.
yeah. No one thought that Gen was anything, and many people had said that to me, or I had heard it in passing, and then and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And so that was why when Evo, what was it, 2014? No,
When Shen
13.
won,
Yeah,
I think it was 2013.
yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw that he was moving up and then he got to top 8, I was like, I'm calling it. Xian's Gen is gonna take it,
Nice.
and then it totally did. And I felt pride, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
It just like he was a guy who I had met before everyone was like, oh yeah, that guy. And
Yeah.
that was really cool. But I was that was delaying me from my CVS2 story, which was that I then took Ramus to we went to another arcade
Mm-hmm.
in this big mall in Singapore, and he had never played CVS2 before. And so we were playing, and I was beating him, and then he was like, "Oh, so like when this thing happens, this thing happens." And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What if this?" And I'm like, "Well, then that." And so after, 3 matches, then he was completely schooling me again because
Downloaded.
he's one of those relatively technical players
Right.
who's just like, okay, well, if these are the things, then here's what happens now,
Yeah.
and this is how I play a video game.
Yeah.
And
And,
that's really interesting to me to see those kinds of people.
yeah. I mean, and it's the way I've always thought about it is that like you learn one fighting game and then you learn your second fighting game and you realize, oh, these games share a common vocabulary, right? It's not a hundred
Yeah,
percent overlap, but it's enough to give you a jumping off point to where you can start like deconstructing each game and thinking, oh well, this is good and this is good, and I know from other games which are similar that means the combination of these two things are good, right?
yeah,
Um, that I remember when you first told me that Shin story though, and I was just thinking like, man, this is one of the reasons why I love fighting games, and honestly, like it was one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on this show and more broadly like do a show like this where I talk to people who are kind of involved in video games elsewhere to talk about their overlap into fighting games because for me personally fighting games have always been super distinct from everything else in the industry, and it wasn't until I started like kind of meeting people who worked in the business that I realized that no, like everyone pays attention to fighting games in some form or another, right? And a lot of
hmm
us have a personal connection to fighting games, even if we're not a competitive player, right? Like,
yeah,
um, I've shot the show with Adam Saltzman, the Cannibal dev about Street Fighter. Jamie Chang, the I think he's the president of Clay, right? The studio that did Mark of the Ninja and Don't Starve and all that stuff. Like he was super into Third Strike, and I met him at a party. We just talked about Third Strike. Fucking Nathan Vella stopped me from getting DQ'd in pools at Evo like a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Which was amazing, right? Like the dude's like the founder of Cappy Games, I think, or I
Yeah.
forget what his title is, and he was
For
at
president, I
Evo,
think.
yeah, for the indie game showcase. He heard someone calling out my name and just started texting me like, "Oh, hold on, let me get him real quick." Like that to
Yeah.
me is amazing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of thing, I'm definitely nobody would say that I'm a great fighting game player.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoy watching it and I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the drama of it, especially when I know what's happening. Like the thing about Street Fighter is as long as somebody is there on a stream explaining it to me,
Yeah.
I know what's happening. And I know a little bit more than some people,
Right.
and I know less than some other people, but I can I can see what's happening and hearing what the commentators say enough times and starting to pay attention to the players who I would say are the ultimate characters of this game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I start to be like, oh man, he totally dropped it, and then something happens, and I love that. Like my girlfriend really likes watching Evo
Yeah.
and Capcom Cup with me because well, for a couple of reasons. One is it's fun to just watch the drama and stuff, but another reason is that I vaguely know some of these people and I definitely know a lot of their backstory. And so we can be watching something and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, this kid Knuckle you
Yeah.
know, he came he came from out of nowhere at like 18 and he started really doing well, and he's sort of the new hope for America
Yep.
in in Street Fighter, and and
Someone actually dug up a GameFAQs post from NuckleDu when he was like 15, and he's like asking some question on the forums, and he's just like, "Oh, never mind, figured it out," or whatever, right? And then like 2 or 3 years later, we're just like, "What?"
yeah, it's so great, and just one thing that she also mentioned was she liked how diverse it
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, we as people who pay attention to fighting games are aware that it's a pretty diverse group of people, but it's like it's great to see a whole bunch of people up there being competitors and respecting each other and also disrespecting each other,
Yeah.
but only in the game.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's great. Um, it feels like a relatively positive space,
Yeah.
and it makes the drama much more fun
Mm-hmm.
than uh, than it could otherwise be.
Yeah.
So, it's she doesn't play fighting games at all,
Mm-hmm.
and she really enjoys watching this, and that to me says something about fighting games, about competitive games, and
Yeah.
about how they could and should be packaged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yep.
Yeah. I did you watch Games Done Quick at all?
I watched a little bit. I was pretty busy, but I managed to watch some.
Irene and I were talking about this. I think on like one of the first few days, we're watching the stream, and we're watching the stream specifically after like I mostly watch fighting game streams these days. We're both just
Hmm.
like, wow, the crowd is almost all just like kind of chubby white dudes.
Yeah.
And that is like that's the face of Games Done Quick, more or less, right? Like there aren't that many women or people of color or like
Well, until like Sonic comes out or something,
yeah.
then the black dudes start showing up,
Yeah.
and sometimes Mega Man. But yeah,
I was joking around with some of my coworkers today that like what I really want is like you remember like the first arc of Initial D where like Takumi's like, oh, is this really so great? Like I never really had fun doing it before. I
yeah,
want that, but I want it with like a Brazilian kid who grew up playing a Genesis like well into like the 20 teens, right? Because
right,
that's like one of the most like the widest install bases in Brazil or whatever. And he just knows how to play Ranger X. And like he
yeah,
speed
yeah,
runs it, and he's got all this like frame perfect bullshit and whatever, and that's just how he plays the game, right? It's like, oh, is this really so special? Like I want that manga, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of Brazil, it's kind of like a little bit like Kiyama in the Capcom
Mm-hmm.
Cup, where it was like who was he? He was a dude whose friends told him, "No, you're actually pretty good."
Yeah,
And then
and mostly playing on the internet, I think. Like,
yeah, and then he gets there, and then he's like, was he top 8?
I don't remember offhand if he was top 8. I remember he impressed people and he put on a good show. I don't think he made top
He
8.
got real far. He
Yeah,
got
I
real
think I
far.
think he made top 16.
He put a lot of people into losers.
Yeah. So the last arc of the fighting game Brandon Sheffield story that I want to get to is like, you've kind of you pointed out these times. So Danny RGT in chat is saying he got 7th. So I am wrong. You're right. He made top 8. So one thing I'm interested in is like you had that taste of kind of local success and improvement and an investment in the game, right? With Vince and with Asuka, and then later like a moderate amount of competence with CVS2, like you're or Street Fighter 4, right? You're at least like confident enough to go and just step up and play the game, right? Which deters a lot of people, right? Like the prospect of playing fighting games in public, of losing in public, is intimidating to a lot of people. But you've done it, and that's no problem. Why do you stop? Like what is it about you where like when I got bit by that bug, I got bit hard. I was like, oh, I lost to someone. I must never let that happen again, right? Like. You know what it's like to feel good or to feel invested in a fighting, to feel engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why stop?
So there are several reasons I would say. One is a lack of competitive streak when it comes to, if I know that a bunch of people are way better than me, I'm like, well, that's how that is. Those guys are better than me, and I'm never going to be that good.
Yeah.
Because Daigo practices all day. All these guys, they practice constantly, and that's just it's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So there's the knowledge of the amount of time required to invest,
sure.
And I just don't have it, and I won't make time for it. So that's like the objective big one.
So I'm curious, why compare yourself to Daigo, right? Like in any given year there can only be one EVO winner and one Capcom Cup winner, right? Like at this point, like I'm 30 years old, I've resigned myself to, like, I don't stop daydreaming about winning EVO, but I'm not going to win EVO, and that doesn't stop me from playing.
Yeah, so the thing is, like, when I get more involved in Street Fighter, the watching of the streams and all that stuff, I realize how much stuff there is that I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
Like with Asuka, I can see somebody do something that I haven't seen before in this way, but when I see them do it, I'm like, oh man, that's cool that you can do that. I know how to do it as soon as I see it, because the game is so relatively simple. There's only so much in there. There are like 13 characters or 12. I don't remember exactly. I think it's 12. And when you see something new, it's not going to take you long to figure it out. Now, I haven't read through the combo FAQs that are on GameFAQs,
right.
Because my fingers are not dexterous enough, perhaps. No, I mean, they could be, but I guess that's not what's important to me about fighting games. What I enjoy is having this competition with some close friends and being able to, watch the ebb and flow of a thing while I'm in it. And with Street Fighter or Guilty Gear or any of these, there's this, I'm at the lowest tier of competence, basically. Like, I am competent. I know what the moves are pretty much.
Right.
But I don't know what FADC means.
Okay.
And I can't. I look at DeCapre like doing forward and back dashy things, and I'm like, I understand that they're trying to bait someone out and then land a thing, but can I do that? I can't envision doing that.
Right.
I can't envision figuring out how to do that well. So those kinds of things are what stop me. Like if there were, however, a an Asuka tournament or a Garoden tournament at Evo, I would definitely sign up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I would love to not place at the top,
Hmm.
like near the top in Asuka. That would
Yeah.
be so exciting to me because it would mean that there are other people
Right.
that play this game.
Yeah. You have
Because I
not
would,
seen the top of the mountain. There are strong opponents out there, and you must test
right,
yourself. Yep.
that's that's right. Um, so
So,
you know that
so
that would
sorry. Just to be clear, where we're at is like you're not you are motivated by the same Ryu like quest as everyone else. It's just that the mountain you're looking at is this hipster ass fucking obscure mountain. Like,
that's right.
there aren't a lot of trails, but you know.
I'm trying to summit artisanal mountain over here. My mountain's got a scarf. You know, it's chilling. Um, but yeah, so it's it might. I think though, there's also the possibility that if, let's say, Asuka became one of the most popular fighting games in the world, and
Hmm.
it was played online,
Yeah.
and people got really, really good at it, and now my best was not good enough, and I would have to study those combo FAQs, and I would have to learn how to like do keyboard style
Hmm.
uh, um, with my buttons, and I would have to get less sloppy. I would probably have less fun.
Yeah.
I would probably pull back from the game.
Sure.
Um, one of the things that when I was playing today, that I realized about the way that I learned to play this game is that I would start to link together the things that you could do, but the timing was the toughest part.
Hmm.
Like how do I do this when, or why do I want to do this at this time? And I found myself today just, during this time period where I knew that like my hit was out, or I was falling, or like I was waiting to come out of a block stun, not stun, but a block stance.
Hmm.
Uh, I would just spam this move until it would happen because I didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. But for a lot of other in a lot of other instances, I do know when it's going to happen, and I
Right.
don't have to spam. I can just be like, this is going to happen now. And like if I could erase the spam part, if I
Hmm.
could just be doing purposeful, intentional
Yeah.
moves, then I would be at a different level. And that's the hardest thing for a player like me who doesn't play from a place of knowledge, but a place of instinct and memory,
Hmm.
like muscle memory. This all comes from it all comes back to being interested in fighting games for how they feel, because I just play by feel, even though I can do some reads, and I can pay attention a lot more than I used to be able to with this game. Um, I'm still a feeling player, not as much of a thinking or mechanical player. Another little thing about Asuka that I neglected to mention that sort of kept me playing this game is there was a game in the late 90s, early 2000s called Queen of Heart 99.
Yep, that was a good
Uh,
one.
yeah. So the thing about Queen of Heart is it's essentially based on the Asuka system.
Hmm.
Um, and some of the characters play very similarly. And it's four players simultaneous. And at anime club, after anime club in college, we would play Queen of Hearts sometimes. And there were a bunch of players of that game in our club, and they all got really good at it. And my base competence was just coming from Asuka.
Hmm.
Um, but they were all better than I was, but I was also on a team with one of those people that was better than I was.
Okay.
And I was able to contribute, and that was fun. And then I found that some of what I learned there translated back into Asuka. Even though
Sure.
Asuka was a bit slower, it was more methodical, way fewer characters. Some of that actually came back. Um, and I think there's definitely something to be said for letting people approach one system a bunch of different ways. Um, and the the using the same essentially the same like fighting system, these two games wound up complementing each other for me.
Yeah, it's it is fascinating to me that you have had a lot of a lot of the kind of foundationally gratifying experiences that come out of fighting games, and it didn't stick, right? So you had the feeling of mastery, you had the feeling of competence, you had the feeling of exploration, of like kind of wanting more competition, and even the feeling of like fundamentals crossing over, system knowledge crossing over from one game to another, something that like you stick around in fighting games long enough and you get to feel all that stuff. But
Yeah.
normally it happens with people who are far more driven by the competitive stuff that you are.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's weird because you say it didn't stick, but there are definitely people out there who played Street Fighter 2 and then they stopped.
yeah,
Those are the people for whom it didn't stick. Like
yeah.
I still play Asuka every time I go to Los
Hmm.
Angeles. So it's like it didn't stick as a competitive thing, but it stuck as a hobby and a hangout time.
Hmm.
Uh, so I still like fighting games and I still play fighting games. And anytime I get I get excited every time I get some new weird fighting game that has some bizarre system to it. And I like a lot of the time I can't figure it out, and I have to watch someone like you play it.
Hmm.
But I like that stuff is there. I like that people are trying these different ways of interaction, like the Matra Melee games, Groove On Fight and then Power Instinct Matra Melee are my two favorites in that, like the Saturn one and the Neo Geo one. Um, those games, the movements of the characters, when you're doing well, they all flow into each other
Hmm.
so nicely. It looks so intentional, and it really impresses me every time I play that game, even though I'm not great at it, just seeing what can be done. And this dude that Tim and I know, Stabo in Tokyo, he played Rumblefish 2 just for ages, and he got stupidly good at it. He was one of the best players around at that game.
Hmm.
Um, and it was such a very specific game. Like, what got him into it? I don't know. How did he wind up playing that game? But I had played Rumblefish 1 a bit on my PS2 by myself,
Yeah.
and I was hanging out in Tokyo, and I went with him to TRF Arcade
Hmm.
in Nakano, uh, and there was still a Rumblefish 2 scene going on there, and so I was trying to play some with him, and he was giving me tips, and he was giving me tips in a way that I could understand
Huh.
because he clearly learned the game by playing against other people and just figuring it out.
Right.
And he was like, after you do this thing, then you can like if you use your fierce, then the spear is gonna happen, and then this thing's gonna happen. And but the way that he was describing it was he didn't use a term like FADC.
Hmm.
He was like, hit this button, and then this thing happens. And it was just somehow simpler
Huh.
and more understandable to me. Have you seen the anime Haikyuu? I think we talked about this, but have
I
you
have not
not
yet
seen it?
seen it.
Yeah, so Haikyuu is this volleyball
Hmm.
anime, and the main-ish character, Hinato, he's always describing things in funny ways. He's like, "Give me the serve that goes shoom instead of the one that goes whoosh," and
Which is
and
exactly how you describe things.
right. So it's like when if he's like, yeah, so just do this, and then the character will go like zzz right through, and I'll be like, oh yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. So
It's
that's
that's funny to me because based on that description, I suspect that you know fighting games well enough to be able to anticipate some like rather advanced properties of that move, right? So like if you're like, yo, give me the move that goes quite straight through, you're probably thinking, oh, that's probably not a move I should use that often because it might be unsafe on block, and you might not think about it
yeah,
like that, but you would think, oh yeah, it's that kind of move, right? It's
Yeah,
just like
definitely.
it's like you've kind of learned some design patterns about fighting games are like burned into your brain, and you just understand them intuitively at this point.
Yeah, I think it was when it was that first time that we played, or no, maybe the second time that we played Asuka.
Hmm.
Um, you were saying that, and it was sort of the origin of this conversation. I think you were saying that you were surprised. You watched me play that game and realized that I had an understanding of that game that was deeper than any other fighting game you had ever seen me touch.
Hmm.
And that I was actually applying, some actual fighting game knowledge to what I was doing and was actually able to describe what was happening,
Yeah.
not just being like, I'm hitting these buttons and
Yeah.
I'm gonna maybe do some shoryukens and just I hope you walk into them, please. Uh,
I mean, I remember playing you in Street Fighter 4, and that's roughly what you did. So,
oh yeah. Yeah, see, like when I was playing Street Fighter Alpha 3,
hmm,
I really enjoyed the ability to jump into the air, as Ken, do a hurricane kick that would go toward an enemy,
hmm,
and then uh, hit that a couple times, and then go into a Shoryuken straight from there.
yep,
That was super fun for me. And in Asuka, that's the kind of thing that you're supposed to do all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And so it just took the things that I wanted to do with Ken and made a video game out of
yeah,
it. Uh, So, like that, I want to be rewarded for the kinds of things that I want to do,
hmm,
and that's why Asuka worked so well. And you know, again, talking about the things that stop you, I don't I don't understand how to use a charge character. I
hmm,
understand objectively how to use one, but I have never in all these years figured out exactly when how long I have to hold back
yeah,
and then forward to
yeah,
do a sonic boom.
yep.
Especially because the manual said 2
2
seconds.
seconds.
And
Yeah.
I kept that in my head forever, and it's obviously not true.
It's even worse because if you look at the in-game timer in most fighting games, the timer does not correspond to actual seconds. So if you
Right.
think 2 seconds and you count out, it's actually much longer on the timer.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, so charge characters are interesting because they're like they're a very obvious concession to say like you get the utility of moves that often are superior to their non-charge counterparts,
Hmm.
and the trade-off is you need to kind of quote store this elusive charge.
Yeah.
So it's these moves affect your ability to move freely more than other moves, right? But the
Hmm.
actual mechanics of playing them, yeah, there's a certain rhythm that you have to get into.
Yeah. And then I never got it. And I remember anytime a fighting game is like, okay, you move from this diagonal to that diagonal, I'm like, well, okay, you have lost me completely. It's
Hmm.
not possible for me. Like I think in Alpha 2 and or 3, um, Chun-Li's got her kick super,
Yeah.
where you've got to go from down left to down right, and then down left again and up right, I
Hmm.
think, and or forward, I should say. And I can't do it.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how many wrong inputs I'm doing. I don't know which are the wrong inputs that I'm doing. And that kind of complexity is just that's the sort of thing that tells me no, you're not gonna
Yeah.
get very good at this game because if like you can't figure out how to do this, and we're not gonna tell you.
Hmm.
We're not gonna tell you what you're doing wrong exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, because frankly, I don't know. Is it that I'm hitting too many additional directions? Is it that I'm doing not enough? Am I not doing it at the right speed? Um, am I supposed to hit the button right at the end or simultaneously with my last input? I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's I just had to admit that I wasn't gonna be great at that, but um I can I can play a simpler game and have a really good time. And I have come to feel that a simpler game doesn't mean a worse game, or simpler doesn't mean less complex.
Hmm.
Uh, it just means you can get into it faster because Asuka, there's a lot of there's stuff going on, and it's not as simple as say Smash,
Yeah.
which probably people say it's not that simple, but it's pretty simple.
And I mean,
Um,
even like in the bigger, in the grand scheme of things, Street Fighter 4 is a much simpler fighting game than most of the ones that came before it.
yeah, yeah,
But we saw
it's true.
that was arguably the highest level of competition we've seen in a fighting game, at least at that scale, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a really great Japanese major Third Strike tournament last weekend, and it was really cool to see the dudes who just probably haven't stopped playing Third Strike,
Hmm.
to see what that game looks like at a high level. But like the amazing thing about Street Fighter 4 is that uh, it like we'd see new killers and Evo champions show up like years after the game came out, right?
Yeah.
Um, in any case, thank you very much for sharing the fighting game side of things. I'd like to transition a little bit and talk a little bit more about stuff you're better at, in the hopes that maybe I can learn a little bit more about. Um, well, again, like a lot of the stuff that I'm interested in is skill acquisition and development. Because for me, I learned how to get good at things by by getting good at fighting games, then applying that kind of mentality and method to everything else. And so I'm always interested in people who tried fighting games and kind of like found a like less than all encompassing obsession with them, but then went on to do other things really well. So I've known you as a writer and an editor for a while now. Like I said in the beginning of this show, like you're super influential. Your work has been super influential to me personally. So there is that aspect of skill development, but I'd like to touch on. But also, I'm interested in how you took kind of the writing and editing skills and your taste, which I think it's like when I think about what Brandon Sheffield has as a person, right? Like if I were to bring you on a game project, what would you bring? I feel like your taste and knowledge of a lot of esoteric stuff is probably like one of your biggest assets, right? Um, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about kind of how you developed all those things, whether like all three of them in conversation or perhaps separately if that makes more sense. But because when I think of like what makes and this is an opportunity to talk about some of the games that you're making too. Like when I look at kind of the beginnings of what makes a Brandon Sheffield video game, there's a lot of neat stuff that goes in there and. Like as game development as a whole kind of gets more accessible, right? As the tools and the methods and the publishing channels get more accessible, I think what sets people apart is going to be more connected to your ability to create something kind of unique and distinct and cool, and not I was able to put out this much content or this complex an engine or push this many polygons or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah. So we can start talking about that stuff. Do you need like a drink or anything?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I think I'm all right.
Cool.
Well, I don't know. Actually, maybe I'll fill up. I could fill up my tea.
Yeah. Go ahead and fill up your tea real quick. We'll take a
All
brief
right.
break.
I'll BRB.
And I will encourage. So I'm going to tweet this out too, just kind of that we're getting into the second chunk of the show. But I will encourage people who are interested in working in game dev, if they want to show up with questions, maybe we can handle some of them together because that could be a neat thing to do.
Yeah. Sure. Okay.
Chat, how's it going? Shout outs to drinks, y'all. I got a whole bunch. This is iced tea and this is some whiskey.
Okay, I'm back.
Yay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and tweet this out real quick. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, all y'all in chat, go get yourself a drink. I would give you one if you were here.
What was it that got all garbled up?
I said I encourage the people in chat to get themselves a drink, and we can talk game
Oh
dev
yeah.
and other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about the stuff you're good at and how you got good at them.
Okay, so I'm not sure. It's hard for me to say that I'm good at any things. But the taste thing came largely from, I think, not having a lot of games to play, and then playing them and figuring out what I liked about them and trying to find other games that I liked and having that sometimes be challenging. Like, I remember this specific interaction with somebody at a game store when, I played Gunstar Heroes on my stepbrother's Genesis, and then I went into a game store and I was like, what other games are there that are like this? And they're like, there are not really any. And and they were pretty right, but not exactly, I don't think, for the reasons that they thought. But they recommended Contra Hardcore, I guess, which was sort of something. But I realized it was hard to find games that I liked for the same reasons as other people.
Yeah.
Or rather, it was hard to find other people who liked games for the same reasons as me, which was part of why Insert Credit was formed, because there were more people who liked games for the same reasons.
Or for other weird, but like uniquely weird reasons, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like when it comes down to it, I feel like your appreciation of games is very different from like what Tim or Vince or anyone else gets out of it. But we can all agree that all of us are weird in an interesting way.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing, is to try to figure out why you like what you like, and instead of being like, this game is better than that game, be like, this game resonates with me because of these reasons. Figure out who you are as a player and as a consumer of this media, and build from that. Like, the thing that I always liked the most in games was when they tried to do something and they didn't necessarily succeed, but it gave you this feeling of like, oh man, look at that.
Yep.
Look what they tried to do over here. And I love that kind of stuff. Like, there's this game called, oh man, I'm blanking on it. It's called Crosswiper. There we go. Crosswiper for the PC Engine. And it feels like it's based on a Sentai anime, but it's not.
Okay.
But you're a guy, you walk around and you punch and kick, and then you can transform into one of 3 different superpowered guys. And it's a tough game. It's got some interesting stuff to the combat, but you're really rewarded visually by going through, you start in a pretty normal town looking scenario, but then you're fighting on this hover train in the darkness with a Neo Tokyo glittering background going on. I'm like, all right, I can hang this. And then you get a little further, and then there's this terrible, intensely difficult section with all these pillars and these guys trying to knock you off. But the music is great, and there's this beautiful sunset behind you. And I'm like, well, I can't be that mad because because I love this sunset and I love this music. And as long as you give me a cool place to hang out for a while, then I'm happy. And so I think realizing that for myself is what helped me identify what I like and don't like in games. And what I like, I don't care as much about a polished, perfect video game as I do about something that feels different. So no matter how smooth Halo 3 may be, it didn't excite me as much as um, as you know, there's this what what's it called? There's a first-person shooter from Japan, Doom style, but not using the Doom engine, and they tried to do some different things in
Huh.
there, and it's objectively a worse game, and definitely not as fun, but it engages me mentally in a different way.
Yeah.
And this could also be because I'm not a fantastic player of video games. Like, I'm not super proficient at any of them, but I like to be there.
Hmm.
I wanna hang out in that world. And so I think those kinds of things helped me to identify what I like and don't like in games. And I because I was so interested in games, I wound up building up this really big library of them and playing them all because I don't believe in collecting for collecting's sake. So I've tried a bunch of different games, and when someone's talking about a mechanic or something, I have generally some references to that in my head
Yeah.
right away, which is nice. But at the same time, that kind of stuff can get me into trouble when making games because the things that I like are sometimes kind of vague and feelings oriented.
Hmm.
And so, depending on which person I'm working with, that can be cool or it can be frustrating for me to have this idea of a direction I want to go, but not a full 100% immediate understanding of the mechanics of getting there.
Right.
So, like with Gunsport, which is a game that we're working on now, which is 2v2 volleyball with guns kind of thing. It's got a lot of Windjammers influence. It's also influenced by this game called Dogpatch, made by Midway in 1978 or 9.
Right.
And
And then, just so we're clear for this stream, Gunsport is not out yet.
oh yeah.
And is there? Do you have like a target ETA for when slash if it'll come out?
Sometime in the later middle of this year, I would say, is
Okay.
when it should. Um,
It has been available to play at it. Like you brought it to Evo, and it's shown up at GDC a couple times. Like it's
yeah,
not impossible to find. And so if you ever find this handsome-looking dude demoing a game on the right side of the screen, it's probably Gunsport. I remember playing your early prototype when at
yeah,
like I think we were playing at the Hotel Figueroa,
yep,
and it was great because like. Seth Killian came by, and was it Nathan Gary came by, and like we just had a bunch of dudes who immediately jumped into playing it, and like it just clicked, right? Like it just felt really
yeah,
good.
yeah. And but so a lot of the reason that it feels good is not because of me.
Hmm.
A lot of the reason that it feels good is because of the programmer,
Yeah,
who his mechanical understanding is greater than mine, but um, the feeling of the environment that we would create and the kind of game that it would be, um, a lot of that came from me. But it also is a point of conflict because he would have much rather had a game where, uh, all the shots are essentially the same, but the timings are different.
hmm,
Whereas I was like, different weapons, different shot patterns. Everything's different for every character. Um, and that sounds crazy and stupid, kind of. But it makes the game, it makes you interact with the game in a different way that was more exciting to me, but less exciting to him who plays Third Strike regularly,
sure, yeah,
Um, so, but at the Tokyo Game Show, some dudes from the Guilty Gear team came by and played the game for an hour straight.
sweet,
Um, and they had a lot of comments and criticisms and stuff, but they were still just doing it. And I was really enjoying this one guy who had such precise movements with his hands. Because he must have played a lot of Guilty Gear.
yeah,
Um, he was just like he was holding his controller down by his crotch. He was just holding his arms slack basically, and and was just barely moving. And he was doing really well. He was being so efficient, and I really liked that was possible
Yeah.
with this game. Um, so yeah, I mean, taste or
And to be clear, when I'm
or
interested in your
opinions.
taste, it's not just in games. Like I think it's fascinating in games because that's the point where you have the most overlap, and also like uh, where I get to see the output of your taste,
Mhm.
right? But like I feel like it's similar for like your personal fashion or music or art, right? Like and like to be honest, I never really thought of myself as the kind of person who was interested in cultivating opinions about stuff like visual art.
Mhm.
Until I met you, and I saw, and I think we were going around the first Friday that one time, and like you were shopping
Oh
around in
yeah.
some art. But like we're like when we first started working with Juan Ramirez on the Illos in GD Mag, and it's like, oh man, like I hadn't really thought a whole lot about cultivating kind of like for me I'm almost notoriously bad at developing any sense of kind of visual taste, but to
Mhm.
see how like to see your brain work at that kind of stuff was super fascinating for giving me kind of a template to work off of.
I guess for me, like, I want to sift through a lot of input and find the cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the things that excites me most. So when I go to another country, I buy records there, and learn about what rock music was like in Korea
Mm-hmm.
in the 70s or the 60s, or versus what was it like in Vietnam, versus what was it like in Thailand, or what was it like in Poland or the Czech Republic, etc. And when you take a bunch of different cultural approaches to the same basic structure, you find some interesting things. Um, and a lot of this stuff will be crap, but some of it'll be really, really cool,
Mm-hmm.
and I would never have heard it otherwise. So I'm always on the hunt for new stimuli, uh,
So how do you find it?
through.
Like what if I just gave you a round trip ticket to fuck, I don't know. What's a good place? Let's say
Mm,
park you off up let's say just drop you in like India,
yeah,
right? Put you right in Mumbai or something.
I know exactly what I want.
Okay, what do you want? What does Brandon Sheffield go do?
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna search for stores that. One of the first things I'm gonna do is look for stores that sell records.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I get there, I'm gonna have in my mind a few things that I'm interested. I'm interested in Bollywood music from the 60s because a lot of it was synth, uh, I mean, sorry, psych rock based, or some of it was, and then
Okay.
also early synth work in the 70s there was really interesting. So I'm going to start off looking for some of those things, and if I find a place that sells records, and I find a shopkeep who is knowledgeable, and I ask about these things, they're going to be like, "Oh God, well, have you tried this?"
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to get some insight from them, and they're going to teach me some things. I'm going to learn some things. This happened when I was uh, well, it's happened a lot of places, but there was this time I was in Hungary and I was looking for Hungarian rock music, and I demonstrated that I knew some bands like Scorpio and Locomotive Gaete and some other Hungarian bands. And he's like, "All right, so you're an American guy and you are interested in my country's history through rock music. I
Mm-hmm.
have so many things to tell you." Like, he was just like, "This one, beautiful. You have to have this. And then this one, this has the uh the guitarist from Ilesh, when he was at his prime, and so you should definitely listen to this one." And so, these people are really excited to talk about things that they're interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you can find those things, then if you can find those people, then you're going to get a lot better
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I would do that. I would also go to a flea
I would
market.
I'd also like to interrupt real quick and say when I gave you India as an example, you weren't just like, oh, this is the method that I always use. You're like, oh, I'm already planning out my trip, right? Like because
Yeah,
someday there's going to be a game dev conference in India and some asshole is going to fly you out to give a stupid talk, and while you're there,
yeah,
you're going to come back with a suitcase full of records.
That's right. That's what's gonna happen. And and then I'll go to a flea market of some sort, and I will look for any kind of weird old electronics, games,
Hmm.
any kind of weird knockoff stuff that I can find, anything that's cool, and I'll look for records there too.
Yeah.
And there it'll be more random purchases,
Hmm.
just things based on whether I like the cover or whatever. And also, since I'm in India, I will probably get some clothes made, which is something that I do in China,
Hmm.
um, because it's hard to find the exact things that I want sometimes, or sometimes I have a thing that I like, but it's falling apart, and
Right.
I want it again, and so I'll have someone remake it. So that's the other thing that I might do when I'm there. But the other thing is, and I guess it's kind of all related, is if I know anybody, I will find out what places they like to get a beer, where's the good vegetarian food.
Hmm.
Um,
I feel like that's actually a really good in.
yeah, yeah. Usually my first point of entry to any given country is who do I know here? Who
Hmm.
do I vaguely know here? Who do I know from the internet here?
Right. And you know
When
a
I,
lot of people from the internet, thanks to, mostly, I think, to insert credit.
yeah, or through branching off of that
Yeah.
from GDMag or GDC, but ultimately it all boils down to insert credit. But it's like I went to Finland and I was thinking, okay, who the heck do I know in Helsinki? Do I know anybody?
Hmm.
And then it turned out this dude Sulka from who was a GDC regular, and he was on, I think, the Europe advisory board at one point or something. Turned out he was there, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come uh, take a drive with me and my family up to my grandfather's cabin in the
Sweet.
woods?" I was like, "Well, yeah." So drove up to a nice cabin near a lake. We walked to the lake and ate cloudberries from the ground, and I had a home cooked finished meal of like root vegetables and stuff, and I was like, man, this is this is pretty awesome. And so just having that as my first experience was like, okay, I see what's going on here a
Hmm.
little bit. Like I'm not scared of this place anymore. Um, but yeah, in general, it's like use some point of familiarity to then put myself in a slightly different position that I wouldn't be in otherwise, and then try to learn something from that. And I think I apply that to all of my appreciation of media, movies, video games, music, art, fashion, any of those things.
One thing that I've noticed, and this is kind of something I realized about myself a while ago, is that I am drawn to people with like skills or facets about them that I want to emulate. And one of the things I realized after the fact with you was that like you're remarkably tolerant about hanging out with random jerks from the internet. Like you give a lot of people a chance, right? You're like when especially, and this is again in the kind of the you know the backdrop of game development where it's so easy to find people who are just like, oh, did you make any of these, like do you have you made a thing that I know about? If no, fuck off, right?
Yeah,
Or like maybe less mean, but like you're not worth my time or whatever, right?
yeah.
Whereas like I feel like you are remarkably, I don't know if it's like patient or you're willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, or maybe it is that like insert credit and the work you do by now are such a good filter that anyone who bothers to get in touch with you must be interesting in some way. Um,
There could be some of that. I think it's mostly just if someone approaches me and seems to be either nice or genuine or both, ideally both, then I'm fine with talking to them. And if the way that I respond to whatever they say to me doesn't make them leave or think that I'm mean, because that seems to happen a lot actually, then we can have a conversation. Like, if someone comes over and they feel it feels immediately like they want something,
mhm.
then that conversation is not going to go well at all.
Right.
But if they come over and they're, I don't know, they like my shirt, or they heard my talk and have a question, or they're like, oh, I just wanted to tell you I really like insert credit. Then they get really nervous and then they want to go away, and I'm like, no, that's cool. Let's have a conversation. How you doing? What's going on over there? Um, because it's it's nice to feel like I feel like one of the big things that would solve a lot of the problems that we're having with people being angry about video games right now
Hmm.
is if they felt like there were other people who thought that they were smart or wanted to hear what they had to say. And I feel like if more people felt like they were listened to or appreciated just as a person, uh, they would in turn pass that along and be more understanding of other people. Um, yeah, that's what I think.
That's a really nice sentiment, man. I like that. It's definitely like, I don't know. The more that I put myself out there online, especially after releasing the Street Fighter book, and um, that kind of got me to the point where I will occasionally get picked out at FGC events, and they'll be like, "Oh, hey, I like your thing" or whatever. And I try to be like encouraging of that kind of stuff, right? Even if it's just a hey, what's up, and a handshake, or like let's talk about this thing, or let's go get lunch or whatever, right? Like, and I think a lot of that was inspired by just seeing like literally anybody from the internet come by and just be like, "Oh, you are Brandon Sheffield. I read this thing that you did at the time of the place, and you talk about it, and then you talk about other stuff, and maybe they kind of follow you around for a while, and it's totally okay, you know."
Yeah, yeah.
You actually do kind of have like this like Space Channel 5, like you just walk around at an event, and eventually people start following you. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I think other people maybe have more of that, but I feel like I do have a tendency to group up,
Hmm.
but I don't feel like I'm necessarily the leader of that group. It's just I guess other people.
Oh, your audio cut out. Hold
Oh,
up.
sorry.
There
Yeah,
we go.
that's my fault. I folded my arms and I hit my little button.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, I don't necessarily feel like I'm the leader of that group walking around. It's just it's a group
Hmm.
that forms, and and we're all doing stuff. Like I don't know, my one of the programmers I'm working with right now, Shane in Ireland, he um he just sent me an email before GDC being like, "Hey, what if we hung out at GDC?" And I was like, "That's cool." And then he showed up. He turned out to be a nice guy. He had actually done a little testing for me on Gunhouse,
Cool.
uh,
So,
which I didn't actually put two and two together until after we were hanging out. That was the same person. But he was really pleased to be treated like a real person,
hmm.
and we went around to all the same industry things, and I guess he was so used to people being jerks that he was just like, it's nice. It's nice to be appreciated and respected instead of being like, oh, hey, yeah, that's cool that you're here. Well, see you later. Bye. I'm gonna go and do important things. Um, and now, we've been working together for more than a year, and so it's kind of maybe embarrassing to talk about at this point. But
I do appreciate that as almost like the kind of the practical backdrop of all this, though, which is like a lot of the work that you've done on Necrosoft so far and the stuff that you've been working on has happened not because you had like amazing resources to draw from or even like high level connections. It was like, oh, I was nice to you. Right?
yeah,
We had a conversation like human beings, and that was enough to get you on board with doing this thing, right?
yeah, yeah. And I just hope that nobody follows me down the wrong path as a result of that. I hope not to lead anyone to ruin. Um, but yeah, it's just, being a genuine person to other people gets you far. And that's what got me this shirt.
Yeah,
This shirt,
what is that shirt?
can you kind of see it
I
here?
say, hurry, our sale ends something.
Yeah, yeah. So this here is what Agent York Morgan, Francis York Morgan, puts his coffee cup down on on the newspaper he's reading in Deadly Premonition in the chapter
Oh my god.
Hurry to Harry. It says Harry right here. Um, this is a one-off um, Deadly Premonition shirt that
That's
Swery
amazing.
made for me. Um, and so yeah, because Swery and I talk to each other like nice dudes,
Mm-hmm.
he made me this shirt. Um,
Aw.
yeah.
All right.
Uh,
So I wanna conclude that chapter by saying you have and we've actually gotten some people in chat asking about your games. So I want to get to some of the questions that people are asking in chat, but before we do, I want you to plug something from somebody else that's not yours.
yeah. So this is an easy one, but I feel like not a lot of people are making games like Downwell.
Downwell.
Um, yeah, a lot of people are making games that are uh, about feelings or thoughts or ideas, and that's cool. But mechanics, people don't appreciate mechanics enough, and
Mm-hmm.
like what feels good to play. And if there were a so-called game feel category of the IGF, I think Downwell should win because it's
Interesting.
so chunky and the inertia is also predictable. And every time you mess up, you're like, damn it, I messed up.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's a very as soon as I saw a video of that game, I got jealous.
That's a great feeling.
Yeah, and then I met him and I'm like, wow, he's a cool guy, that Ojiro.
Sweet.
And so yeah, Downwell. I think Downwell's really cool. Oh, but another one I would like to plug is Dropsy.
Dropsy.
Yeah, Dropsy is a point and click adventure game about hugging people. It's about being a scary clown that just wants to
Oh,
hang out with people, but people are scared of him. Um,
that's
and
sweet.
it's a very sweet feelings oriented game. It's the opposite of the thing that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But not enough people played it, and I would like for more people to play it. I think that Undertale came out just a bit after that,
Yeah.
and they were both aiming for the same kind of idea,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody played Dropsy.
Yeah. Did you play
Uh,
Undertale?
nope.
Okay. Uh, I think you should. At least because this is, I feel like, I just played it through my first playthrough like a week or so ago.
Hmm.
And frankly, I think at this point you should play it just because it will inform a lot of like future work, right?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's one of those like milestone games in the industry's history where like you just at this point like you might not be that impressed. I was super impressed. I played that game and like you know how this is actually is interesting. I was talking with this Twitter bro, Kaien Nasaki. He's the dev on I Want to Be the Guy,
Hmm.
and he and I were talking about how like we both played that game, and as someone who's been working in games, when you play a game and you see the kind of creative decisions that a dev makes, you understand why, right? You can see behind the curtain enough to think, oh, they did this because they want me to feel this way or think this thing or
Hmm.
whatever. And that's interesting, but maybe I would do it the same or maybe I would do it differently. And with Undertale, I was consistently running into the feeling that whatever happened next was not something that I would have ever thought of.
Mm.
So like I would play it like to me it was kind of humbling to play it and just think like I don't know who the fuck this dude is, Toby Fox. Like I don't know who the fuck he is, but he just came out of nowhere and made something that just like hit super hard. And so
Yeah.
I think you should play it for that. Even like I don't know if you'll like it or not. Now,
Okay.
so those are some rad suggestions. Definitely, we've got some people in chat talking about them already. So it looks like you've
Yeah.
hit some traction there. You want to go through some questions now?
Sure.
Okay, so to start with, actually, before we even started the stream, it won't scroll up that far. But there's someone asking if there's any way to get the games that you released, I think on PlayStation Mobile. Now that that's all shut down, I guess their memory card got corrupted. Is there like can you get those games?
No.
No. All right.
The
That
answer to that
happens.
question is no. However, if you want to play Gunhouse, you can get it on the Amazon store. It works
Huh.
on Amazon devices and some other Android devices, but not really. We wanted to that's a game where like I have felt as though I want to finish it. It's not
Yeah.
finished for me. And so I haven't put it out on other platforms, the version that exists. And I almost feel like at this point maybe I should have put it out because it's been like more than a year, probably a year and a half
Hmm.
since the game first hit PlayStation Mobile, maybe 2 years. And so I could have put out an iOS and Android version a year and a half ago and then built a new version later and people would accept that. Uh,
Yeah.
I wish I had done that, but we do have it on. It works on some Android devices, so you can get that. But oh dear, we're
That
trying
was
to
just the
work.
alpha that you released on PSN, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh dear, Alpha. We're trying to do a PC version
Hmm.
of just the alpha, but we don't really have time and resources to do
Right.
it. So a friend of mine's doing it in his spare time, but not really doing it right now. But I think that'll happen eventually. Eventually, we're gonna make the final version of Oh dear.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of questions from our friend Ian Adams that I'll just go through at once. He's mostly
All right.
trolling you in chat. We
Yeah, I bet.
have Pat. Can you ask Brandon how come he's so dumb, and also why his taste is wrong and everything?
It is
Plus, tell him that I love him.
it is a good and difficult question to answer. I a fun thing with Ian is, and this is similar to like playing Oscar with your pals in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
He's got a Neo Geo cabinet, and he wanted to play. There was a time when he was asking anybody who came over if they wanted to play Magical Drop 3, um, because it's hard to find people that A know what it is and B are any good at it. And
Hmm.
so he asked me if I wanted to play Magical Drop 3, and I was like, heck yeah. And then we played, and then I won, and he was like so happy because he had
Yeah.
been destroying everybody.
Yeah.
And so now, we were actually pretty equally matched at this game. We both knew how to play it. Nobody needed to, like, we both tried to pick world at the exact same time as our character. Uh, um, and so, yeah, that was a fun little thing. And it's so great when you find or can introduce someone to a game that you like that there isn't a whole bunch of fanfare
Hmm.
for. That happened also when I brought Al Yang
Yeah.
and Vince over to play Landmaker, this this game on the Taito F3 board. Um, it's a really fun puzzle game that totally took me by surprise. I bought it in Japan for $20. I just bought it because it was cheap. And then I played it and I got super into it. And now just the three of us are really into that game, and we both play it whenever. This is the game that we play here in the Bay Area.
Okay.
When I go down to LA, we play Oscar, and then when we come here, we play Landmaker.
Oh, I wanted to mention briefly. I think it was you and Vince that introduced me to Twinkle Star Sprites, and that
Oh
actually
yeah,
ended up coming in super useful for a game jam, an internal game jam when I worked at Riot,
Mm.
where we were thinking of making like kind of like a versus mode shmup, and I was like, "Oh, you guys want to make Twinkle Star Sprites? Star Sprites? Okay, we can just do
yeah,
that." And they're like, "Wait, what?" And so I showed them the
yeah.
videos and everything, and but I was like, in that moment, I was like, "Oh, Brandon would be proud."
That's right.
Um,
Yeah, it's one of those things where people are like, okay, I've got this idea. You've never heard it before. And then if you've played like a huge number of games because you're a big idiot, you can just be like, oh yeah, I like this game.
yeah, yeah, especially when it comes to Japanese games from the '90s.
Hmm.
Um, further questions from Ian include also if you could ask him why he's so bad at Ascension, that'd be great. How'd you get your hair so cool? Why do you refuse to look at the camera? And this is probably the best ones. Can you have Brandon tell the story about how Oh Dear was my idea?
Oh yeah. Well, my camera is up here, so it's a weird place to look.
Hmm.
That's the reason for that. My cool hair I got yesterday in um, the new Chinatown at Fawn's hair salon.
Wait, which
And
area are we calling New Chinatown now?
oh, that's I mean, it's always kind of been New Chinatown. It's on International and 12th.
Gotcha.
Um, south of the lake,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where all the Vietnamese, Cambodian,
Right.
and Laotian stuff
Yeah,
is.
they opened a Lee sandwiches over there. I was super hype.
Yeah, they did. But it's been casually called New Chinatown for
Mm.
a while, and there is in fact a business called New Chinatown Pharmacy
Okay.
over there. But I don't think that's its official name if it has one. And then about how Oh Dear was originally Ian's idea. Basically, we were still using AOL Instant Messenger at the time,
Nice.
and I was working at Game Developer, and he pops up in chat and says, "Hey, those uh, those signs that say 'Dear next X number of miles'?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, what if when you saw that, the road was just flooded with deer for that number of miles?" I was like, "Yeah, that would be weird." And then he's like, "We should make games about that." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so he and Frank Cifaldi and I all promised to make a game based on our own interpretation of that, and only I did it.
Yep, you sure did.
Yeah.
Um,
Although, I didn't. I don't want to say I did it because
yeah.
we did it as a team.
I will say one of the fascinating things about seeing you go through Oh Dear is the kind of like the game that you're ending up with is like it's like Outrun, right? So you've got like
Yeah.
a faux 3D, basically a 2D racing game,
Yeah.
and like I remember talking to you about having to actually go and figure out like how they created the illusion of 3D. In a game like Outrun, and then reproduce it in Unity, right? Was what you're working with?
That was in the earliest stage, yeah.
Okay,
It's not Unity now.
gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, at one point with the first, or rather the second programmer that worked on that project, it was ultimately three different programmers.
Hmm.
Um, they couldn't figure it out how to get this to work, and so
Yeah.
I was like, well, it works just like how it does in Road Rash. And they're like, okay, well, how does that work? And I didn't know, so I looked on Moby Games to see who the programmer of Road Rash was, and and
You should just
and
ask Simon Carlos. Be like,
then,
hey,
yeah, then I added him on Facebook, and then 20 minutes later we were having a phone conversation about how that worked.
well, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, that
I
was
love that
pretty fun.
video games are a thing that you can just do that.
Yeah,
And it
that's
would
one.
never occur to most people, right?
Yeah,
But you
that's one of the
can.
coolest things about video games is that almost everybody's still alive.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to know how something happened, you can ask.
Yeah.
And I asked also about how Outrun 2 was made, because
Hmm.
Outrun 2 is one of the big, like, Outrun visually and Outrun 2 gameplay wise are two of the big touchstones. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, the third programmer, Desi, he just figured it out and did it all by himself.
Hmm.
He totally got it. And one of the surprising things to me was, looking at this game, we tried to put so much stuff in there, so much scenery, and camera tilt and cool effects and things. And then I look at other attempts from other people, and no offense to them, they probably made a game a lot faster than us, but they got so much less stuff in there, and it
Right.
was very surprising, including 3D games,
Hmm.
and that just had way less scenery. And yeah, we wanted to make a very generous game, and we sort of wound up with it.
Um, Another question, Fiampu asks, could you ask Brandon what he thinks of video games that try to look and feel like movies? The example is Uncharted.
Oh,
That seems like
they're
exactly not your type of thing, I feel like.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say they're fine. Um, it's not really my jam. I think that it's worth doing for a certain crowd, and it helps to kind of buoy up the industry in certain ways, because um, they make money, they're blockbusters, and then some of that money filters down, and the people that work on those games go off and sometimes do something more interesting. Um, and those games do have a lot of interesting micro moments in them, like just a feature that my team would make an entire game about is 10 minutes of Uncharted.
Right.
Uh, and that's interesting, and that's kind of cool that they can do all that stuff. But my big problem with games that try to be so realistic and so movie-like at the same time is they wind up being they feel so not real
Hmm.
because the more real you try to get, the less real you're going to be.
Right.
And so things that wouldn't bug me make me crazy in a game like Uncharted when like I carefully go and I knock out all these dudes in this courtyard, and then I come back and they're all awake. It's like, what the hell, man? I just did all this. Why are they awake? Or like, why does this guy like suddenly notice me? It's because there's a trigger here that means like for the story he has to notice me. But I did a good job. I
Right.
got away.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of stuff just it drives me crazy. But in a game where everything's representational, um, it doesn't bug me. In a game where enemies like disappear in some shower of fireworks or something, when another enemy is suddenly there, I'm like, well, yeah, you know.
Hmm.
But in a game that's supposed to be real and have consequences, the fact that those consequences are definitely not real just doesn't work.
Right.
So that's how I feel
Yeah,
about
I
that.
mean, that makes sense. If our expectations are we are playing a game where there's a board and there are gems coming down or what, and we're clearing them or whatever, uh, you know, the amount of like there is no fiction that or no expectations of reality that need to be suspended, right? But
Yeah.
you do something like Uncharted, right? And at the very least, I'd expect it to follow, if not real world logic, at least movie logic, right? But
Hmm.
I actually haven't played any of the Uncharted games. I steer away from cinematic games because I I mostly like the crunchy like game mechanic stuff, and then I like a narrative that is tied directly to that, right?
Yeah.
So if I want, I mean, I don't know, man. If I want a cinematic experience, I'll watch a fucking movie.
Yeah. Straight up.
Let's see, what else do we have? So someone asks, "Yo, Brandon, I'd love to know more about the status of Odear. Will it only come out if you find a publisher?"
That depends. It will only come out if I have enough money by by some time after Gunsport comes out. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't need very much money for Odear because essentially the ideas are all there. There's just the work to do, and one programmer slash artist the guy who did the original, he can do it mostly himself,
Mm-hmm.
with me poking at it. So it won't cost very much money, but I don't have that money,
Right.
even if it's not very much. So the answer is, I feel like of all of our games, Oh Dear is the most likely to come out without a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
But I cannot guarantee. I think that yeah, we need to sort out finishing Gunsport first, and then we're gonna get to that because it's the same programmer. So
Sure.
yeah.
Um, ooh, here's a good one. Brandon, where in Oakland should I get a beer and buy records?
Oh, well, it depends on what kind of beer you like and what kind of ambiance you like. My favorite bars for hanging out in are the Avenue and Ye Old Hut because the Avenue gets crowded, but it's not full of jerks usually.
Mm-hmm.
And Ye Old Hut is usually not crowded, and it's also not full of jerks. Those are my two big things. And it also doesn't look pretentious, and it doesn't have a whole lot of fancy stuff in there. Um, and usually you can get a Line 51, which is my favorite Oakland brewery at the current time. So the Line 51 1-inch punch is a good one.
Huh.
Um,
I didn't realize that there is a brewery called Line 51. Are they
yeah.
actually along like the AC Transit 51 line?
I think they are maybe. I don't know for sure.
I spent a lot of time on that bus.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, I don't like the bus very much.
nope.
And then if they want to know where to get a really good beer, the Trappist has those.
Ah.
And also there's a new place in Berkeley called Fieldwork. It's
Hmm.
relatively new, and they have I've never seen the same. Well, I've seen a couple beers there twice, but mostly you don't see the same beer twice. They make a batch of beer and then when they sell out of it, they get a new one or they make a new one. And they're all really adventurous.
Hmm.
Some of them are failures, but they're always trying something. Like there was a um, coconut pilsner that was very
All right.
warm and rum-ish almost.
Huh.
Um, I had a lime goza there the other day that was really good.
What's
There
a
was a
goza?
goza is a Belgian like sour type of beer made
Gotcha.
from fruit
Okay.
and or made with fruit, fermenting fruit. And they have they had a Mexican hot chocolate style one that tasted a
Whoa.
lot like it wasn't hot, but it tasted a lot like chocolate
Sure.
and chile. So it was pretty cool. So those are my recommendations for that. And as for records, you should um, like I have the best luck digging around in Rasputin and Amoeba. Those are
Mm-hmm.
good places to go. But
You just go to the ones in
but
Berkeley or what?
in Berkeley, yeah.
No.
But the record store that I go into and have to like try not to bring money is 1234 Go Records on 40th Street. I always find stuff that I want there, and so do
Is that
friends
the
of
one that
mine
just
who
opened
have
up on
stuff.
like 40th and Broadway around there, like across the street from the from Homeroom, the mac and cheese place?
Um, it's down the street on the same side as Homeroom, but it's
Okay.
actually been there a while.
Okay, cool. I'm thinking of a different
Yeah.
one.
Um, but there's Stranded, which is fine. I They took away their dollar record section, which was cool.
Duh.
I mean the dollar record section was cool, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
Um, and as a weird one, depending on what kind of stuff you like, Down Home Records in El Cerrito is an interesting place because they tend to specialize in folk music, world music, and jazz, but
Huh.
their dollar section is just people who came in there with a bunch of random stuff, and it's none of those three things, and so it's a dollar,
Hmm.
and so you can wind up finding some interesting things there that would cost more elsewhere in their dollar section.
Okay. Well, you got your recommendations. I hope you're still out there. Um,
Yeah.
Someone wants to ask about a Korean fighting game, Eye of Typhoon, which
Yeah, so
I do not know about. This is Adam Amazing or Ad
yeah,
Amazing.
Ad Amazing. Yeah, Ad Amazing is always bringing the good questions, but I have not played Eye of Typhoon. I've only watched video. Uh, so I don't really have anything exciting to say. I am sad
Sweet.
to
I've never
inform you,
played it.
but it's yeah, it's by Vicom, and it's one of those fighters history. It's very fighters history
Okay.
uh, dynamite like there. Um, and I think it was a PC game originally, but I don't own it, so boo earns.
Yeah. Boo earns indeed.
Yeah,
Oh, floor bed. So one more beer recommendation. I like Beer Revolution on. I think it's like third. It's
yeah,
third off
on Jack
Broadway.
London.
Yeah, by Jack London Square. They have some outdoor seating. They have a really big selection. It can be a little bit crowded, and the crowd there is kind of hit or miss. But at
Yeah,
least the last time I was there, it wasn't too pretentious.
yeah. The only thing I don't like about Beer Revolution is that they use that ocean-soaked tap water to wash their glasses, and I taste it every time.
Oh man.
But that nobody else feels that way, but
Yeah, I don't. I think that. I mean, your sensitivity extends to your taste as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um, let's see.
But you can get that vegan soul food and bring it over there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
and as another fun thing, if you want to try something that's not beer, there is a lot of Ethiopian or Eritrean honey wine
mm-hmm.
made in Oakland, and You can get it in the restaurants. Some of them make their own, but most of them seem to buy from these 2 or 3 distributors. And if you want to just get one at a liquor store, which will be slightly cheaper, you can go to U and I Liquors on Telegraph and like 49th or 50th or something in
Right. Yeah.
between
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. I've driven by that spot. I remember the sign.
yeah.
That's. If anyone else has any other questions, get them in soon. We have a note from Nothing Excess. Thank you, Brandon, for working with the others to restore the IC Wiki, which, as a
Oh
result,
yeah.
restored a copy of the old Mafia variant we used to play on IRC. That's pretty
Oh
cool.
nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
One
Good.
satisfied customer.
I'm glad.
And yeah, if there's anything you wanted to talk about, Brandon, or ask me, you're welcome to.
Oh man, I feel like we've been talking for forever, so I
We
shouldn't
have
say
been
any more
talking for
things.
forever. Um,
Um, but I am I mean I almost feel like I should if I'm gonna ask you questions, I should do it at a later time. But I
sure.
do have some questions about the game and your approach to these things, like filtered through how we talked about it,
Hmm.
accessibility and all that. But I feel like I should play it first.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that
yeah,
should probably happen.
yeah.
All right, so there's one last question that we have in chat, which is it's pretty broad. Are there any
Hmm.
cool Korean games? I just looked at Eye of Typhoon and it looked interesting, but I can't tell if it's good or not.
Yeah, the answer to that question is yes. There are cool Korean games. Um, the things that you should pay attention to are there's a guy named Bjulbram, Byulbram. He is he's kind of Korea's first indie game developer.
Whoa.
He made a fighting game for the 386
Oh shit.
before Street Fighter 2 was even out on consoles.
Mm.
Um,
All right.
Unfortunately, that game is lost. But every
No.
yeah, but every other game that he made exists and is around. He made some other fighting games. But like the really interesting thing to look at for fighting games with that guy is that because he made his first fighting game for PC, straight for PC,
Hmm.
before he played Street Fighter 2,
Yeah.
um, his fighting game style, the style of fighting game that he makes, has come from a totally alien point of evolution.
Hmm.
So like his most recent one is called something Cross, Asura Cross,
Asura Cross.
I believe. Yeah, and that's out on Android and iOS. It should be played with a controller though. But he made games for the GP32. He made a game for the GP Wiz, I think, as well. Which was the earlier version of Asura Cross. So that's interesting. It's not like none of those games are perfect, but they're cool. He also made a versus online mech shooter called Dynamo Beast, which was pretty okay. And then should look out for the games by a guy named Hakyu Kim. He made Lars the Wanderer and Ant-Man 2 in the early days. Ant-Man 2 was his love letter to Gunstar Heroes.
Okay.
And Lars the Wanderer is a side-scrolling action game thing. Those games are also well, he doesn't own them. You can't buy them legitimately, but you can find them on the internet. He doesn't even own them himself. He has the boxes. I went to his office once and I was like, "Oh man, you finally got those games." And he's like, "No, those boxes are empty. My mom found them at a flea market, and she's
Oh.
like, "Oh, my son made these, but they were empty," uh, which is really sad. But then he went on to do Ragnarok Online
Okay.
and Tree of Savior, which is the current game that he's doing, and Granado Espada, which was extremely ambitious. He's a dude that loves systems and making them work, and he made a card game, which is really interesting and good, but did not come out in the US, which is weird. But and then there are a lot of Korean phone games that are pretty legit,
Hmm.
but I'm not really going to get into that. There's so many, but I really liked Xenonia.
Oh, I played one. I think I played like Xenonia 2.
Mm-hmm. It was like a fun action RPG in the
Yeah.
style, in sort of in the well, in the animation style at least, of this older game called Astonishing Story, which first came out on PC and then GP32 and then eventually PSP. Um, it gives me some of those vibes. It's an action RPG, and I like how it works. It's got a good vibe and a good feel, but I wish I were playing that with a controller. Um, yeah, there are definitely interesting games, and now you should be paying attention to the contemporary Korean game scene because there are things like there's this game called Restrom, I think.
Restaurant.
Uh, it's monster spelled backward, if I'm
Okay.
doing that wrong. And that is a game that's coming up that's it's all about perspective shifting in a way that I really enjoyed
Hmm.
because usually I get bored of that stuff.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, I really liked that. I played some games at the Busan Indie Connect thing recently,
Nice.
um, and that game was great there. And also Dungeon Warfare, which is the most generic game name, uh, it's a Steam. Uh, um, man, where'd my brain go? Uh, Tower defense. Wow, there we go. Tower defense game, and it's essentially Orcs Must Die in 2D.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not exactly Orcs Must Die, of course, but it's a similar type of game, and it just feels really good. It's really smooth. It solves a lot of the annoying problems of tower defense, and it's super one of those one more game type of things where you're like, oh man, I think I can see the solution this time. So I really like that one. So yeah, there are plenty of good Korean games, and you should play some of them.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I will stop taking up all your time, and thank you. It's I don't know. It's a huge pleasure having you on the show and getting a chance to talk to you about this kind of stuff. I feel like this is actually probably a better conversation that you and I have in person sometimes, just
Yeah.
because the moment anyone else is around, I can't bug you about this stuff for like 18 million hours. So it's super
Yeah.
fun. Yeah, thanks, man. And all y'all go check out Gunsport. Keep an ear to the ground for when it happens, because it's a super cool game. It's a lot of fun, and it is. I don't know. It's it feels good and the design's great, but also like the aesthetic that you kind of put into it. I feel like if you play that game, then you might understand a little bit more of what I'm talking about when I talk about why Brandon's taste is so impeccable.
Oh, it's very nice of you to say, and thanks for having me do this thing. It was fun for me too. And people that are watching, if you want to sign up for our newsletter that we're gonna start doing on necrosoftgames.com, that would be appreciated.
Sweet. I will also plug this thing too. Then for people who for all of y'all who have been watching the stream for a while now, thank you so much for your continued viewership. I do this because y'all keep coming back and making and it's been super fun to kind of do stuff and hope that you enjoy it. Right. For people who are new to the stream, thanks for checking it out. I try to do interviews. I'm starting a new thing this year where I do interviews with people just kind of in games or other cool stuff. Talk about fighting games, but also talk about like other stuff that they might that they might do, whether it's making games, writing, music, art, whatever, to kind of tease out a little bit of like how you get good at stuff, how you cultivate these skills and attributes that hopefully so that we can all learn from this kind of stuff. So Mondays I do interviews. The rest of the week I'll usually talk about fighting games. I'll either like lecture on a topic or I'll just stream some games or whatever. So I'd really appreciate a subscribe or subscribe or follow or whatever. I think it's just follow. Just click the button underneath the window. But yeah, I would love it. Like if you guys had fun, then I love it if you guys follow and just continue to check the stuff out because I have a lot of fun doing this kind of stuff, and it's only gonna get bigger from here.
Heck yeah.
Heck yeah, thank you. So thanks to everyone. I'm calling it good night, y'all. I'll be back probably tomorrow evening with some replay review in Street Fighter 4 and Rising Thunder. I'm just going to go over some videos that people have sent and kind of see if I can tease out some stuff and like critique their performance, offer them some feedback to see if that helps them improve. If y'all have videos you want me to take a look at, I'm happy to do so. So just you can send them to me on Twitter. I'm at Pat the Flip. It's right down there. And thanks again for watching. Peace out, y'all.